दुर्गे जगदम्बे भवानी, जय दुर्गे जगदम्बे भवानी, जय दुर्गे.
Hi, welcome to Spirit Voyage, and my name is Flossie Park. There's been a lot of talk lately about yoga, its foundations, and how perhaps the United States has taken the spirituality out of yoga. It was originally designed as a spiritual practice, a path to God realization, to self-realization. But when yoga came to the United States, we took it all and put it on the shelf, and then we pulled out the physical and we said, this is yoga. And truly, it isn't. It's only 1/8 of the path. The postures are 1/8 of the path. But I think what gets confusing in the United States is because we confuse yoga with religion. And we need to be really clear that yoga is not a religion. It is, however, very spiritual. So what's the difference between spirituality and religion? Religion is a ritual. It's something that you practice. It's an outward form. You could say it's above ground. Spirituality is something that you live. It's underground. It's a way of being. You can be religious and not be spiritual. In other words, not have it in your heart. Or you can be spiritual and not have a religious practice. Or you can have both. But the beautiful thing about yoga is that it encompasses all spirituality, even if you are seeing spirit and God in nature, or whether you see it in a deity, or whether you see it in an avatar or a great one. And it's important to recognize that that was the original path. The original purpose of yoga was to find that union, because that's what yoga is. Yoga is union. Union has lots of connotations and lots of levels. It could be union of body and mind. It can be union of heart and soul. It could be union of male and female. Lots of different unions. But ultimately, it is a union between yourself, your smaller self, your ego self, and your higher self, your divine self. And that's the ultimate goal, but there takes many paths. You could say that God realization is at the top of a mountain. And up that mountain are lots of different paths, and everyone has to find their own path. All paths eventually lead to the top. But if you don't, you can't take someone else's path and then call it your own if it's not authentic. But ultimately, that union is when you realize that part of you that is the divine, or you connect with the divine. Whether first, usually you can see it outside of you, and then you learn to find it inside of you, and then you realize, I am that. And it's a process, and it takes lifetimes, and we have to be really patient and really compassionate towards ourselves and others, because everybody is on their journey, and everyone is living out their belief systems. And it's all perfect. There's no good or bad. It's just people are operating from their belief systems. But what's happened now in the yoga world, and in the spiritual yoga world per se, is that there's this blending of science and spirituality, and also psychology and spirituality. In other words, if you are going along and doing all your yoga practices, you're meditating and you're doing your asana practice and your pranayama practice, all these practices, but you don't have the foundations of belief and goodness of yourself. In other words, psychologically you're still a little askew, they need to come together. In other words, the physical practice of yoga and the spiritual practice of yoga has to be combined with a psychological stability. That's the yamas and the niyamas. But what does that mean in regular terms? It means that you can never ascend to the top of the mountain if you've still got your baggage, because it's going to hold you down. So psychology and spirituality are blending now. And we really find that this journey up the mountain is about becoming psychologically well and whole, and really finding that part of us that is driven by the ego, and really learning to connect by the part of us that is our higher self, that is calling us up the mountain. When I was, years ago, I was in marriage counseling, and the counselor said to me, well, Flossie, you're totally unconscious. And I was like, what? I'm unconscious? You're talking about me. I'm a yogi. I do all this stuff. And what he said was, and what he meant was, at first I was totally insulted, but what he meant was that I was not conscious of why I did what I did. And that's huge. It took me almost 3 decades from that time to realize that being conscious of what we do is exactly on the spiritual path. So when they asked Buddha, are you a god or a man? Buddha's response was, I am awake. So right now on the planet, it is about each one of us waking up to our path, waking up to what is the baggage that's holding us down, but really coming to this place of self-acceptance and non-judgment, and being okay with our journey, and knowing that we're going to a university, we're going to a school where our soul has orchestrated this curriculum for us to come to an understanding of ourselves. So there's another union, the union with yourself and the understanding of yourself. Because when you become aware, you start to think, why am I saying this? Why am I thinking this? It doesn't mean you won't say or think those things, but you always come back to, what is my intention for doing this? Am I doing it from the ego who wants attention, who wants validation? Or has something to prove? Or am I acting from my higher self, which is just here to create experience and love? When you become aware, something will come out of your mouth and you'll say, oh, I was doing that to make myself feel better about myself. Or I was doing that to justify, or anything. But it all takes different forms, and it's a matter of really not being judgmental about yourself, but being aware of what is coming out of your mouth, or why are you doing the things that you are doing. And that awareness equals enlightenment, because when you become aware, you are enlightened. You still may have those thoughts from this belief system that you've been carrying, but you can recognize it and say, wait a second, I don't need to act on that. Because what's happening on the planet now is that we are all shifting. We went from the Piscean age of following the leader to the Aquarian age of we are all a community of oneness. The Piscean age was an age of separation, and we were taught, I am separate from God, I am separate from that tree, I am separate from you. And in reality, what we have come to understand is there is no such thing as separation. So this Aquarian age is about community and oneness, and what happens to you affects me. The thoughts I think affect these plants. That's the oneness, and that's the beauty of this journey of recognizing that we are all in this together. So in the chakra setup, the first 3 chakras are very much about protect and defend. I have my security and my procreation and my power. And that's very much, I've got to protect and defend. And if I'm in those 3 chakras, that's where I'm acting. That's how I'm acting all the time. That's Piscean age as well. The past 5,000, 8,000 years, we've been acting that way. But now we've come into a shift, and particularly now in 2012, it's so amped up, where we've crossed our bridge of our heart, and the higher chakras are where we're activating, and that's more of harmony and balance. Of here, I can come from harmony and balance, and still be in my lower chakras, still be on this earth, but instead of protect and defend, I'm in balance with everything. I'm in balance with everything in my life, and I try to keep it that way. And it is my higher self which I am accessing for my wisdom and my understanding, and not my lower self. So that's a really big awakening to see whether you're operating from your old belief systems or whether you're operating from this new place, which in some of us, we have our one foot in one world and one foot in the other, and it's like, well, I don't know where to go. But we do know we can't repeat the old, because if we repeat the old, we probably won't be here too much longer. We have to come to an understanding that there is nothing we can do or say that is going to make God or the divine love us less. And when we really start to integrate that into our lives, we will lose a lot of strain and pain. When we feel like we are okay with where we are right now, and we come into this place of self-acceptance, then we're able to go into some of our pain that comes up, or our angst that comes up, and explore it without faulting anyone, but say, look, this is why I act the way that I do, and I'm not faulting anyone, but I come to understand it. And when I understand it, then I can release it, and I can free myself and say, it doesn't have the hold on me that it used to. And we'll describe what some of those situations might be. But really, self-acceptance is the key here on how to be okay with what is, and not to be always judging and labeling yourself. So if you can think of it this way, your higher self will conceive of an idea. It's the divine internet out there, and the higher self is totally plugged in. It's right about there where the tops of my fingers are. And it conceives of an idea, and then it downloads that idea into your brain, which receives it. The brain receives this idea or this thought. But what finally happens is your mind, which is the file cabinet of all your experiences, perceives it. It decides what it's going to do with that information. Perhaps your higher self is going to say, you are so loved. And the brain takes it in, the pineal gland takes it in, but when it gets into the mind, it's totally shut off. I'm not good enough to be loved by God or by my higher self. So there's this shift that happens, and these belief systems are what cause that blockage. When you have a belief system, your heart is sending, you hold that belief system in your heart, and your heart is constantly sending your brain the message of, I am in love, and then the brain sends out love chemicals into your body, or I am in fear, and then the heart sends it to the brain, and then the brain sends out fear chemicals in your body. And that's why we get sick. That's why we get so stressed out, because we are literally imprisoned by our belief systems. It's about being imprisoned or being empowered. And I always call it imprisonment versus empowerment. Imprisonment is that when we are imprisoned by our belief systems, and we don't even know it, and it's layers upon layers that we peel off. I sometimes feel like I go through a life lesson. I say, oh, I got that life lesson. I'm not supposed to care what other people think. And then it shows up again. And I think, well, I thought I passed this life lesson. But in reality, it's at another level. And this does not make us bad. It makes us becoming free. And what we do for ourselves, we do for the world. So as I free myself up from limiting belief systems that I could have taken on, and I was taught, because all our fears and limiting belief systems were taught to us. And that's an important thing to remember. It's not that we want to fault anyone, but our society teaches us what its version of good is, of what beautiful is what successful is, what we should be afraid of. A little child doesn't know any fears except its instinctual fears, but it doesn't know fears until it's taught. Oh, you should be afraid of that. You should be afraid of this. And we do that to each other all the time. Well, one of my favorite authors, Greg Braden, wrote in The Divine Matrix. He wrote about our fears. And understanding our fears is a really wonderful way to be aware of why I'm doing what I'm doing. So what they did is they did a study, and they realized, they did a poll of what people said that they were afraid of. And the amazing part was they all sounded different. Oh, like, I'm going to not have a good marriage, or I'm going to fail at my career. It all sounded like different, but they were boiled down to 3 main fears. And we all have them to one degree or another, and they drive our life. So these fears bring us into this separation consciousness from the divine. That makes us feel like, oh, God's outside of me, and God can't possibly love me because I'm this way. So these fears really, really promote separation consciousness. The first one is that we're not good enough. Somehow, some of us were taught we were sinners, or somewhere we were taught we're not good enough, we're not worthy of love, we're not worthy of happiness. I do a lot of spiritual counseling, and the number one thing we finally get down to when we really talk it through is that people don't believe they deserve to be happy, or they don't believe life can be happiness. They believe that it's got to be toil and trouble, and you have to prove yourself, and you're not good enough because you're a sinner, or whatever reason that comes up. But it really boils down to, do I believe I am lovable? Do I believe that I am worthy of happiness? That I'm good enough just the way that I am? And like I said, there's nothing you can do or say that will make you less lovable in the eyes of the divine, because you are the child. And a mother or a father doesn't love their child less just because their child gets into trouble. There's always that unconditional love. So that's the first fear that we all have. The second fear is the fear of abandonment. And that would be, well, if I don't act a certain way, I'll be left alone. Or I can't trust anybody because I know they're going to leave me alone. They're going to abandon me. Or we're searching for that security. These things we tend to search outside of ourselves. We're looking for love outside of ourselves. We're looking for happiness. We're looking for success. And if we don't believe that it resides within us and we create it from the inside out, we're always going to be looking outside of ourselves and for validation, for security. Oh, this job will make me feel secure, or this person will make me feel secure. But ultimately, we are afraid of being abandoned. Really take that to lots of different levels and realize, why do I behave the way that I do? The third fear that came down to was the fear of being able to totally trust and surrender to a higher power or to God. And that's a big one, because most of us, a lot of us, are control. We need to control things, because if I don't take care of them, nobody else will. And this is where faith comes in. And a lot of people have been very spiritual in their lives, but they really are, that word surrender is a huge one, so that when something happens in your life, you recognize that it's divinely orchestrated, and there's a reason or a lesson for it in it for you. And if you can embrace it and try to find out what it is, why this is happening, it could be that you're supposed to find out that some of your belief systems are causing this. But it also could be trust and surrender to the divine. In my life has been, when I let go, it's been better than what I've ever dreamed. So it's that, but that takes a lot of courage. The great ones and the great masters and the great saints, this is what they knew. And this is what you come to know when you go through something enough. You say, you know what? I'm not going to be concerned about this, because I really know I am in the divine connection. I am in oneness consciousness. And so I am a child of the divine. So that which is my inheritance comes through. And I don't have to force. I just I do what I have to do, but there's this inner flow of oneness consciousness that creates that. And that's what helps to let go of the fear of trusting and surrendering to a higher power. And often we find out that the things that we cursed or we thought were terrible end up being a gift, because that's a gift for our freedom to get out of the imprisonment and into empowerment. And what is empowerment? I understand my oneness. So I keep talking about oneness, and so this boils down to divine alignment. I can look outside of myself for my happiness, for my security, for my love, for validation, or I can be in the oneness consciousness and go inside and know that it's all inside of me, including the divine. And that I will accept that whatever's happening to me now is for my greater growth. My soul is orchestrating it. My soul chose to take on some curriculum, some life lessons, to overcome some faulty belief systems. And these things are my gifts. When everything's said and done, I have to fall in love with myself. That's one of the criteria. And we were taught not to do that. Oh, who are you to love yourself? Try it. Just try it, to fall in love with yourself and see. And when you love yourself, you are loving the divine. And notice what happens when you live your life from that place of love. Your heart then feeds that message to your brain feeds those chemicals to your body, and then you resonate in energy and it comes right back to you. The bottom line is, it's all about choices. There are no good or bad choices. It's just the path on your way home, and just appreciating the journey. Namaste.